Okay, so we're back. This is chapter 7. Chapter 7, digging in. Yeah, digging in. So they're about to encounter the storm, remember? Let me see. There we go. So they're digging in. That's the title of the chapter. Ooh. Ollie felt his heart sink as he gazed at the storm. Clouds as high as the mountains were charging down toward them. He didn't feel he had any more strength in his body. His legs didn't want to take another step, but he would have to. He would force himself to keep up. To Ollie's surprise, Bear didn't keep on going. Instead, he went to the side of the valley where the ground started to slope and the snow was much deeper. He dropped his backpack on the ground, thrust both gloved hands into the snow, and scooped out a handful. "Give me a hand," he asked as he threw it to one side. Ollie blinked. What was Bear doing? How would digging a hole in the snow help? Ollie didn't understand, but Bear was asking for his help, and that was enough for him. He hurried to Bear's side, and they started to dig out a hole together. Ollie copied the way Bear did it and put his hands together like a shovel to scoop out chunks of snow the size of soccer balls. Okay, so here's a picture of what they're doing. So the storm's already starting up. You see all that big snow happening? So Bear came over to the side. See where it's starting to slope up here? And he's digging into the snow. So Ollie's helping him. They're going to start digging into the snow. "I reckon the snow here is about 12 feet deep," Bear said as they dug. "It's perfect for what we want. Frozen solid on top, powdery underneath." "Why are we making a hole?" Ollie asked. "It's going to be more than just a hole. We're going to spend the night here." "What?" Ollie stopped digging and stared at him. "In the snow?" Best place. Bear didn't stop. After a moment, Ollie went back to digging as well. He had thought the tent back at camp was uncomfortable, but spending a night under snow? "We'll freeze to death," he argued as he dug. "Snow's so cold." "It is," Bear agreed, "but it's also one of the best insulators in nature. Snow has millions of air bubbles trapped in it, which hold the warmth amazingly. This shelter will keep the cold air out and trap our warmth in. Clever, huh?" Ollie nodded. "Kind of like the Inuit in the Arctic when they use snow to make igloos." "Exactly," Bear smiled, "although we'll be under the snow, not on top of it." Ollie's arms ached. He couldn't dig any longer. "I don't think I can go on," Ollie said. "It hurts so much." Bear stopped digging. "I never promised that this journey would be easy," he calmly replied. "But if you can find the strength inside you, you can overcome all things. Keep going, buddy." Ollie kept digging. The pair quietly worked together as a team. Bear didn't need to tell Ollie what to do. It just sort of happened. The longer the tunnel got, the harder it was to throw the loose snow out at the end. So Ollie would scoop it up behind him into lumps and throw it out into the open. Ollie found he had a strange feeling. It was a feeling he wasn't used to. He was enjoying this. He wasn't sure whether it was the teamwork he liked or maybe the danger. Perhaps it was simply the fact that he was doing something that would help keep him alive. Whatever it was, he liked it. Ollie kept going. He knew they were still in danger, but he believed that together they could handle it. His feet were still cold, but he would soon change his socks. At first his arms ached more and more as they dug, but then suddenly they felt fine. Tired, but fine. His body had gotten used to it, and for the first time in his life, Ollie felt proud of what he was making. Really proud. He smiled to himself. Bear crawled back out of the tunnel when it was nearly 7 feet long. "Now we need a wall across the entrance like this," he said, "like this." There were piles of freshly dug snow all around the entrance to the tunnel. Bear used his hands to work some of it into a block. Ollie found that making blocks was like making square snowballs. He could press the white powder into small lumps. So here's some, let's see if you can see the blocks. That just kind of shows what their blocks look like. He could press the white powder into small lumps and then press them together to make bigger lumps. Bear showed him how to lay the first blocks in a line on the ground about 1.5 feet from the hole. Then he put more blocks down on top of them. "What's this for?" Ollie asked as he worked. "The tunnel faces into the wind. We need the wall to keep the wind out. It's the wind that will kill you fastest up in these mountains." Ollie carried on making blocks while Bear crawled back into the tunnel. Good work, Ollie, he shouted back. We're really getting there now, but there's still a bit more to do. More? Ollie asked. Well, we've dug in. Now we need to dig up. Okay, so the next chapter. Let's see if you guys can see this. It's kind of... All right, so this is Snug, is what it says here. So it's just showing more of those ice blocks that he was making. Okay, so now we're going to read about Snug. I think they're going to be bunkering down, huh? Okay, it says, Bear started to dig so that the tunnel sloped upward. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. When Ollie looked up from building his wall, he could see millions of them whirling around in the middle of the approaching storm. It was only a matter of time until they would be engulfed in the blizzard. Ollie made the wall higher as the flakes whipped around him in the growing wind. Each block took a bit of time, but he made himself keep working and doing the job well. He knew now why everything they had done that day had taken a bit more time than he liked. Testing each step, not walking in a straight line, choosing the harder place to dig. It had been so they could do it properly and do it only once. Now that he knew what the wall was for, Ollie realized he couldn't afford to go so fast that the blocks weren't any good or the wall would fall down. He was learning that in the wild you don't always get second chances. When it was the same height as Ollie, Bear told him it was big enough. Ollie happily crawled back into the tunnel. So this is Ollie finishing up. Here's his wall in the background. You see it? So he looks determined, doesn't he? Doesn't look sad. He looks determined. He's crawling back into that hole. His breath's still showing. Still cold, but... As soon as he was back in, he was surprised by how warm he felt. Well, warmer. It was because his wall blocked out the wind, but when he breathed out a puff of air, he could see it whirling in front of him. It's still pretty cold, he pointed out. Sure, Bear agreed with a laugh. He had dug the tunnel upward for about a foot or two, then started to dig sideways. It's still freezing. If it wasn't, then all the snow would melt and the cave would collapse. But it won't get any colder. Outside, we'd freeze to death in that wind. In here, it's a steady temperature, around 32 degrees, and our clothes can keep us warm. Ollie kept on clearing out the fresh piles of snow behind him. Every time he stuck his head outside, the snowflakes had grown thicker. The wind was starting to howl like some kind of animal. He couldn't see more than a couple of feet in any direction. Everything was just white. Remember we talked about a whiteout? Whiteout is when there's just nothing but white all around. Even though he had his hood up, the cold turned his face numb. It was a relief to pull his head back into the tunnel. Eventually, they had carved out a small snow cave at the end of the tunnel. It was big enough to lie down in, but not stand up. Even Ollie only had room to kneel. We're higher than the end of the tunnel, Ollie observed as they brushed the floor smooth. Exactly. Cold air sinks and warm air rises, so the cold air will go down the tunnel while the air up here stays warm. Now help me smooth down the ceiling so it doesn't start to drip on us when the snow warms up with our body heat. Together they brushed at the ceiling with their gloved hands until it was as smooth as it could be. By the end they were both covered in loose white powder. And the very last job, Bear said, is to brush yourself off. Snow on your clothes will melt and make them damp. Which makes you cold, Ollie said with a smile. Bear grinned at him. You're learning. So here they are in their snow cave, right? Kind of dark in there, so they got their flashlight. All snug and settled in. They took turns to knock the loose snow off their clothes at the entrance to the tunnel. By now there was a full storm raging outside. Back in their little snow cave, the air barely moved. It was very dim because the only light came from the tunnel entrance. Bear used his backpack to block it off. And then there was no light at all, so he flicked on a flashlight. He pulled a tarpaulin from his pack and laid it down on the floor. So a tarpaulin is just like a big tarp. That's what we call a tarp. It's a short word for tarpaulin. So he laid down a big tarp on the ground. We sit and lie on this for insulation, he explained. Otherwise, the snow will suck the heat right out of our bodies. He pulled a couple of energy bars out of his backpack. This is dinner. Have you got the water? So here is dinner. NRG bars, right? Ollie had refilled the canteens full of snow several times during the day. The freezing mountain air was bone dry, and they had to drink a lot. Now he pulled them out of his coat for the last time that day. So there's their canteens full of water. What a nice supper, huh? Energy bars and water. You know why they probably didn't want to start a fire inside the cave? I want you to think about that. There is a tip I will tell you about here. So it talks about most shelters. Okay, this is another did you know. It says, did you know your shelter could be the most dangerous place of all? If it doesn't have enough ventilation, that means air flowing through, carbon dioxide can build up to a dangerously high level in an enclosed space. So carbon dioxide, that can come from just what we breathe out. We breathe oxygen in and we breathe out carbon dioxide. So just the act of us breathing, if there's not a way for the air to flow in and out of wherever we're at, then we're going to start breathing in all the oxygen and breathing out the carbon dioxide. And it gets to a point eventually where you don't have any more oxygen to breathe in, so you start breathing in the carbon dioxide and your body runs out of oxygen. So that can be very dangerous. Another danger is when you create a fire. That fire burns, it uses oxygen to burn, and so it releases carbon dioxide as well. So that would use up the oxygen in that area. You've got to have ventilation. Whenever you're find a shelter, you want to have ventilation in, ventilation out, and you want to be very, very cautious about building up too much carbon dioxide. So it says they tucked into their bars and washed them down with melted snow water. Ollie was just knocking back the last drops when he had a thought. What goes in comes out eventually. So he began, what do I do if I need to go? Down there, Bear pointed at the bottom of the slope in the tunnel. Let it soak into the snow, then cover it up with loose powder. We can't go outside now until the storm is past, but it will pass. Storms always do. Ollie looked where Bear was pointing and grimaced. After that, the only thing to do was wait out the storm. It was howling outside, but in here it sounded like it was a long way off. Ollie lay down and pulled the padded hood of his coat up to act like a pillow. He had never felt happier in his life, which was strange considering the danger and discomfort he was in. He looked around at what they had made together. You know, this is actually pretty cool, he said drowsily. Bear smiled. A strong team, good preparation, and a bit of effort, and you can manage almost anything. As Bear talked, Ollie could feel sleep creeping up on him. He was bone tired. He had been walking all day, and then he hadn't stopped for even a moment in the rush to dig the shelter out. He blushed to think how he had lied to duck out of building the den with Jack and Omar. He had thought that was too much effort. It seemed such a long time ago. Then his heavy eyes closed, asleep. So there he is, sound asleep in that snow den. Snug as a bug in a rug, right? I guess as snug as he could be. All right, so we've got 2 chapters left. Let's see how they make it out of the storm. And let's see what happens when he gets back, right? I'd like to know what Omar and Jack think. Okay, so I'll see you again in the next video. Thanks, guys.